Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Gemma and today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in January. There were 13 and I DNF'd one, but I had a super duper reading month. I had, four 5-star books. Whoop, whoop, whoop. And lots of 4.5 and 4-star books. So it was a really strong start to the year, and let's talk about the books. So in last place, the one I DNF'd was To Ride Hell's Chasm by Janny Wurtz. I felt pretty bad about this because I was reading this with Jack from Spread Book Joy, Dia from Novel Idea, and Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot. And I think I managed a chapter and a half before I sacked it off. I just couldn't gel with the writing style. I can't quite put my finger on what it was. It was something to do with the way she was structuring her sentences, made it really difficult to follow. And it's a fantasy book, by the way, a standalone fantasy. And when I'm reading standalone fantasy, I just want to inhale it, and I just couldn't with this because of the way it was written. And I just knew I didn't want to struggle through 600 plus pages of that. So it got ditched early on. In at 13th position, and we go straight in at 3 stars here, so I would say no bad books. We have Orbital by Samantha. Harvey, I have done a solo review, so I'm not going to labour on this. This is literary sci-fi where we follow a group of astronauts as they orbit the Earth over the course of a day 16 times and nothing happens. So if you want like a more balanced review, then I'll leave the solo one linked below. But basically that's the book. Then in 12th place we have Reaper Man by Terry Pratchett, and I buddy read this with the lovely Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, and this one was just a bit weird. It was too weird for me. I had to suspend my belief too much. It's the second book in the Death series, and Death sort of takes a break, and then we're following a wizard who then doesn't die because Death's taking a break, and he gets into a club with other people who haven't died because Death is taking a break. Those bits were all fine, completely got that, but then there's bits to do with trolleys, and it just all got a bit mad, and like a building that was alive. Yeah, I did enjoy Terry Pratchett's comedy, sense of humour throughout the book, and I did enjoy the main storylines, but just like the fantasy elements, not even all the fantasy elements, just the weird trolleys, man. If you've read it, the trolleys. So, next. And it's the first time that this author has ever been this low on my list. And we are into 3.5 star territory now, but we have The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie. I have done nothing but rave about Abercrombie basically all of last year. But this one didn't quite work for me. This is set over about a week following one battle from many, many, many perspectives on both sides of the battle. And it was just too many characters for me. I know I was buddy reading this with Jack at Spread Book Joy and Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, and I just remember us leaving notes like, oh my god, another character, like every chapter, another character. So are we ever going to go back to any of the characters that we've met? You do. But it was just a lot. I forgot who was on what side, who they were, and what they were doing, and what their motivations were. And there was no real plot other than this battle, which will be important for the rest of the series going forwards. This is really the 5th in the series. But yeah, it just didn't quite work for me. The ending was good, but yeah, I was a bit disappointed. And then we move into 4-star territory. So you can see how good this was. So this is in 10th place. So 10 very good books in January. And we have Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Paulsen. And this is just an adorable middle grade graphic novel about a little garlic who ends up having to go and fight the vampire that might come and destroy them all. And it's about sort of finding your inner strength and bravery and not judging books by their cover, and very sort of middle grade themes, but just gorgeously illustrated and adorably heartwarming. So yeah, if you need a little hug of a book, Garlic and the Vampire. Then we have Northern Lights, the graphic novel, which was adapted by Stephanie Melchoir, and the art was by Clement Aubrey. And obviously the original book was Philip Pullman. This was a gift from the lovely Alice, so thank you, Alice. I actually got to one of my Christmas presents in January. And if you're unfamiliar with the Northern Lights, it's about a young girl called Lyra. Effectively, the souls of the people in this world are on the outside of the body and look like animals. So she has Pantalaimon. They can change shape when they're children. And Lyra sort of gets thrown into a bit of a political and religious dispute, which means that children are being kidnapped and taken to the Arctic, and she ends up going on a bit of a rescue mission to find them. And there's armoured bears, and there's witches, and there's hot air balloons, and just everything that you could possibly want from a story. The graphic novel I thought was very good. The artwork was fantastic. I found that a lot of the characters looked very different to what I had expected or pictured previously when reading or watching the movies. But I think that was a good thing. I think it's nice to have a different perspective on things. The one thing I would say was that because I read and loved the original so much, obviously you cannot fit as much plot into a graphic novel format. So there were bits missing, and there was a bit of info dump in it because obviously it's quite a complex story if you've read it. So yeah, really enjoyed it, but it's not a patch on reading the actual book. Then I read Fight Night by Miriam Toews, which was my TBR spin pick. So I actually read that in January. Happy days. And I wasn't sure I liked this until the end when I cried. So in this, we're following a young girl who's being raised by her mother and grandmother. Her mother's pregnant, and we just sort of see the interactions between them all, these three generations of women. And as I said, I didn't think I was enjoying it that much. And then when it got to the end and it made me cry, I was like, I actually really love these characters. So I know, it was so sad. Rudy agrees. Oh, you're kind of in the way, mate. So yes, I enjoyed it. It was really good. Looking forward to getting to some more Miriam Toews at some point. Then I read Abaddon's Gate by James S.A. Corey, and I read this with my little sci-fi crew, which is Sandy at Miss Reads a Lot, Sarah at Freshly Read Books, and Simon at Sprinkled Thought, and Fraser Simons. Did I just say Simon? Fraser Simons at Sprinkled Thought. And this is the third in the Expanse series, and I loved it again. I'm really, really enjoying this series. It's just so much fun. I can't really tell you much about what's going on because it's the third book, but effectively there is a proto-molecule on the loose which it does nasty things to people, and we're following a crew who keep getting drawn into it and keep trying to save people from it. There are a couple of new characters in this book, one that was quite surprising, or her character arc was quite surprising, linked to a character from the first book. And yeah, I just had such a fun time. Such a fun time. There were a few what moments in here. So yeah, I loved it. It was great. You should read the Expanse series. Absolutely. Then I read to my younger son Charlie. We read The Worst Witch by Jill Murphy. If you've not heard of this is a super cute children's book. Very, very short, but it was our first chapter book. It does have some lovely illustrations in. And this is about Mildred Hubble, who may possibly be the worst witch at this academy. And she's always getting things wrong and messing spells up. And one day something happens that sort of redeems her, as you can imagine. I won't go too much into detail because it's very short. And yeah, this is a series of books. I'm not sure how many there are. 5, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, I'm hoping to carry on reading these with Charlie. We've actually got the next one out from the library. It's over there. Rudy, mate, you're not helping today, are you? Then I read Someday Maybe by Onyi Nwabineli, which was fabulous. This was recommended to me by the fabulous Charlie at Charlie Brooke Reads, and we're following a woman whose husband committed suicide. That's literally where we dropped in at the beginning, and we follow her grief process as she sort of comes to terms with not only the loss of her husband, but the emotions that come from him having committed suicide and her not knowing that that was even in his mind. So lots of trigger warnings here, but I thought it was a really good portrayal of grief. And the thing that really stood out in this book for me, because the plot was good, it was engaging, I was engaged all the way through, but it's nothing sort of above and beyond. What is above and beyond is the family dynamic that we have here, and the main character's relationship with her sister and her parents, and I was just in love with this whole family. So highly recommend. Okay, and now we're into our 5-star reads, and my first 5-star, which was also my first read of 2024, was Cheri by Joe Abercrombie. And this is based on a real woman who was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and it's an exploration of what happened towards the end of her life, and Beard has sort of fictionalised how she thinks she felt with what actually happened medically, and this was really, really affecting for a very short book. I mean, I read this in an afternoon. It's like not even 80 pages, and it's quite like a small book, but to show you in comparison. It's like not as big as a normal book, but it packed such a punch, and yeah, it was just beautifully written, really poignant, really heart-wrenching. So yeah, if you have an afternoon where you want your heart ripped out, then give this one a go. Then in third place we have Saga Volume 6. Yes, I know you're probably sick of seeing these in my wrap-ups, but you really need to pick up Saga by Brian K. Vaughn if you haven't already. I am adoring this series, and I think this was actually my favourite one so far. I think I've given them all 4 or 4.5 stars. This one got 5 stars because it did bring a little tear. It was a happy tear. And in this we're following 2 people from different species whose people are at war, and the story is narrated by their child Hazel right through the book. So Hazel in the beginning has just been born, and then we follow her as she grows up in this sort of war-torn galaxy, and her parents are trying to sort of find somewhere safe for her, really. But yeah, it's brilliant. I can't wait to read the next one. I'm getting a bit nervous that there's only a few left that are published. I think there's 11 published, and I've read 6 now. In at number 2, we have Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. I finally finished the Daevabad trilogy. This is a fantasy trilogy set in the Middle East and Egypt, and we follow 3 main characters. Nari, who sort of has grown up as a human but then discovers that she is actually a very powerful magical person. Elaine, who is sort of the Prince of Daevabad when she arrives, and Dara Yavahush, who is sort of a guardian of Nari. And this book had such a brilliant ending to it. I really, really enjoyed the third one. I thought it was tied up brilliantly. Everything that I expected from the first 2 books came through into the third, and Chakraborty did a brilliant job of sort of tying all of the ends together. So yes, I can't recommend this series highly enough. Whether you're new to fantasy or you've read fantasy for a long time, I think this appeals to all and sundry. And then in my number 1 spot, a book that I really think is probably going to be my number one all year. And that is Shogun by James Clavell. I have done a solo review for this, so I'm not going to labour it. I'll leave that review below. But being thrown into feudal Japan in the 17th century, 18th century, and we follow a British sailor who tries to survive the Japanese culture of that time, and it's just fantastic. Brilliant characters, kick-ass female character in here as well. It is quite long, but absolutely worth your time. If you haven't picked up Shogun yet, you really should. There's a mini-series coming any day now, and yeah, this was absolutely stunning from the first page to the last page, and super fast paced. So yes, recommend. So those are the 13 books that I read and one that I DNF'd. I'd love to know what was the best book that you read in January. If you don't want to leave a comment but want to leave an emoji, give me a sword. Is there a sword emoji? Let's see. Or any sort of weapon would be fine. If you missed my Shogun review, I will leave it here, and I will catch you all very soon with another one. Okay, bye guys.